Every spring, you load up your cart with flats of petunias and marigolds. And every spring, those flowers die right on schedule. That's not bad luck. That's the business model. Garden centers depend on annuals dying, because dead flowers mean you come back next May with your wallet open. But there's a whole group of flowers the big box stores barely stock, because once you plant them, they drop their own seed and come back every single year for free. Plant them this June, and next spring, you can walk right past the annuals rack. How does a flower that dies in October show up again in May without you lifting a finger? The Brooklyn Botanic Garden calls these plants self-sowing annuals. They drop seed before they die. That seed sits in the soil through winter, and it germinates on its own the following year. No seed trays, no grow lights, no transplanting. The plant handles its own succession planning, and your only job is to stay out of the way. Staying out of the way is harder than it sounds, because the habit you'll have to unlearn is deadheading. Decades of garden magazines trained you to snip every spent bloom for tidiness, and that tidiness is exactly what keeps you buying flats, since a deadheaded flower never ripens seed. The new routine goes like this: deadhead through midsummer to keep the blooms coming, then put the snips away in August and let the last flush go brown. Those scruffy seed heads are next year's garden, standing right there in plain sight. 2 ground rules before the list. First, volunteer seedlings run on their own clock. They sprout when the soil temperature tells them to, often weeks after the garden centers have already sold you their replacements. So don't till those areas in spring, don't bury them under 4 inches of mulch, and learn what each seedling looks like so you don't weed out your free flowers. Second, if you garden in zone 3 or 4, a brutal winter with thin snow cover can kill some of the seed lying on the surface. The insurance policy costs nothing. Snap off a few dry seed heads in September. Drop them in a paper envelope and keep it in a kitchen drawer until spring. And one heads up before we start. One of these 13 won't bloom at all this year, and it's still the best deal on the list. Number 13, Cosmos. If you've never grown a self-sower before, start with Cosmos because it forgives every mistake you can make. Cosmos blooms in pink, white, and deep rose on ferny plants that can reach 4 feet, grows as a summer annual in zones 2 through 11, and it wants the worst soil you have. Rich dirt and fertilizer push Cosmos into making leaves instead of flowers, so skip the amendments and give it full sun in the leanest corner of the bed. Sow seed directly this month, barely covered, and you'll have blooms in about 2 months. Snip spent flowers through July, then let the late blooms ripen into spiky brown seed heads. The plant drops them at its own feet, the goldfinches take a share, and what's left sprouts next spring right where the parents stood. A packet runs about $2 and covers more ground than a $20 flat of bedding plants. If the volunteers come up too thick next May, pull the extras like weeds, or pot them up and hand them over the fence to your neighbors. Number 12, Bachelor's Buttons. Bachelor's Buttons give you something the annuals rack rarely stocks anymore, a true clear blue. Old-timers call them cornflowers, and they grow as a hardy annual from zone 3 through 10 in full sun and average soil, with no feeding and no fuss. Sow them now for late summer bloom, and after that first season they take over the calendar themselves. The seed they drop sprouts in fall or earliest spring, and those fall-sprouted seedlings shrug off frost and bloom earlier, and stronger than anything you could buy in a 6-pack. Cut all the stems you want for the kitchen table through summer, and the petals are even edible. Just leave the final September flush standing until the heads turn tan and papery. Tuck them mid-border behind something leafy, because a ripening bachelor's button is doing important work, but it isn't pretty while it does it. Number 11, Sweet Alyssum. Sweet Alyssum is that low carpet of white or purple you see edging professional plantings, and the professionals buy it in flats every single year. You won't have to. Alyssum grows as an annual from zone 3 through 10, takes full sun to part shade, and seeds itself into the exact places you could never plant on purpose. Cracks between pavers, gravel paths, the seam where the walkway meets the bed. Scatter seed along your edges this month, keep it watered for 2 weeks, and in about 6 weeks it blooms with a honey scent that pulls in every pollinator on the block. When it goes straggly in midsummer, shear it back by half and it reblooms into fall. The final fall bloom is the one you leave alone, because that's the seed crop. For anyone who's tired of kneeling, this is the plant to know. After the first planting, the edging job that used to take an afternoon on your hands and knees handles itself. Number 10, Borage. Borage is the plant beekeepers wish you'd grow. Star-shaped sky blue flowers on fuzzy 2-foot plants, edible blooms that taste faintly of cucumber, and a season that runs from early summer until frost. It grows as an annual everywhere, wants full sun, and accepts soil that would insult a tomato. Sow the big seeds half an inch deep right in the vegetable garden, because the pollinator traffic borage attracts pays dividends on your squash and cucumbers. Borage has never once asked me for anything, which is more than I can say for petunias. It self-seeds generously, and the volunteers come up big, fuzzy, and unmistakable, so you can spot and thin them from a standing position without squinting at the ground. Let 2 or 3 plants stand at season's end, and you'll never sow it again. If a volunteer wanders somewhere inconvenient, it pulls out with 2 fingers. Number 9. Cleome. Cleome solves the problem of tall color without staking. Spider flower, as your grandmother called it, sends up airy spires 4 to 5 feet tall in pink, purple, or white. And it blooms hardest in the brutal heat of August when everything else quits. It's grown as an annual in every zone, full sun, drought-tolerant once established, and indifferent to poor soil. Sow it at the back of the border this month. As the flowers climb the stem, long narrow pods form beneath them, and when those pods dry, they split and fling seed in every direction. Expect a crowd of volunteers next spring and thin them to about a foot apart, because crowded cleome stays short and sulky. Wear gloves when you do that thinning, since some older varieties carry small spines along the stems. A 6-pack of cleome at the nursery costs around $4 and gives you 6 plants. A seed packet costs about the same and gives you a colony that outlives your patience for counting. Number 8. Calendula. Calendula is the flower cold climate gardeners brag about, one of the reseeders that returns dependably even after a hard northern winter. Sometimes sold as pot marigold, it blooms in orange and gold, shrugs off the frosts that kill true marigolds, and grows as an annual in zones 2 through 11. Give it full sun and average soil, sow now, and expect flowers in roughly 8 weeks. It may sulk through a heat wave, then it comes roaring back in September and blooms past the first light frosts. The petals are edible and have gone into salves and teas for generations. Pick freely through summer, since picking encourages more bloom, but in fall let the spent heads curl into their odd C-shaped seeds and drop. Those seeds are big enough to see lying on the soil. If you want calendula somewhere new, crumble 1 dried head over fresh ground in October and walk away. Number 7. Lovenomist. Nigella might be the easiest flower on this entire list, because the management tip is to do nothing at all. Sky blue flowers float in a haze of ferny foliage in early summer, and when they fade, the plant forms striped, balloon-shaped pods that are honestly more decorative than half the flowers at the nursery. Florists charge good money for those pods in dried arrangements, and your plants make them for free. Never deadhead Nigella. The pod is the whole show, and it's also the delivery system, rattling seed onto the soil in late summer so the next generation can sprout on its own schedule. Nigella is a hardy annual for zones 2 through 11, and it resents transplanting, which is one more reason the seed drop method beats the garden center version. Scatter seed now across the northern half of the country. In the hot southern zones, the patch you start this year will shift itself onto a fall and spring schedule that fits your climate better than anything you'd plan on paper. If this list is rewriting your spring shopping plans, take a second and subscribe. This channel digs into budget gardening every week, and it costs even less than a seed packet. Number 6. Breadseed poppies and Shirley poppies. Nothing else on this list matches a poppy in bloom, those tissue paper petals in crimson, salmon, lavender, and white. And nothing else makes reseeding this effortless, because the pod is a built-in pepper shaker. After the petals drop, the pod dries on the stalk, small vents open under its cap, and every breeze rattles seed out onto the soil by the thousands. Your entire job is to leave those pods standing. Pods grow as hardy annuals in zones 3 through 9, in full sun and ordinary soil. And they have one firm rule: no transplanting, because the taproot won't tolerate it. That's good news for your knees, since there is no digging involved at any point. Scatter the dust-fine seed on bare soil, press it down with your palm, and leave it uncovered, because poppy seed needs light to sprout. It also prefers cool conditions, so a June sowing performs best in the northern zones. Farther south, your job is simply to get the patch established. The seed that drops in July waits in the soil until fall or late winter, then comes up when the weather suits it. Number 5. 4 o'clocks. 4 o'clocks earn their name by opening in late afternoon, right around the time you finally sit down on the porch. Trumpet-shaped flowers in magenta, yellow, white, and wild stripes, with a fragrance that carries on the evening air, all on bushy 3-foot plants that handle heat without complaint. Plant them where you sit in the evenings, because a 4 o'clock out by the back fence performs its whole show for nobody. In roughly zone 7 and warmer, they return from a tuber as well, but everywhere else the seeds carry the line. Those seeds look like black peppercorns, big enough to pick up with stiff fingers and impossible to lose track of, and they drop and sprout so dependably that one June planting becomes a permanent fixture. One real caution: The seeds are toxic if eaten, so keep them away from the places grandkids and dogs do their exploring. Sow now about an inch deep, and you'll have fragrant evenings by August. Up to this point, every flower on this list has been a one-season sprinter. The final four play a longer game, and they include the two biggest money savers of the bunch. Number 4. Johnny Jump-Ups. Johnny Jump-Ups are the little three-color violas your grandmother had popping up in the lawn, the path, and the strawberry patch, and she never planted a single one after the first year. They're grown from zone 3 through 9, they bloom in the cool of spring and fall, and they tolerate part shade better than almost anything else here. Sow them now in a spot with afternoon shade and they'll flower by fall, drop seed, and surprise you next March, weeks before the garden centers even roll out their pansy racks. The management tip requires patience. In late spring, the plants go leggy and shabby, and the urge is to yank them out. Wait 3 more weeks, because those shabby plants are ripening the seed that replaces them. They also reseed straight into containers. So the pots that held violas last summer will sprout free ones this year if you leave the potting soil undisturbed over winter. Number 3. Columbine. Columbine bends the rules of this list a little. Technically it's a short-lived perennial, but individual plants fade out after a few years, and the reason a columbine patch lasts for decades is pure seed drop, one generation replacing the next. It thrives in part shade from zone 3 through 9, blooms in late spring with intricate spurred flowers in nearly every color, and hummingbirds treat it like a diner. Sow fresh seed now, barely covered, and you'll get a tidy clump of foliage this year and flowers next spring. When the upright pods turn brown and papery, snap off a stem and shake it like a salt shaker wherever you want more. Letting columbine run its own breeding program comes with a bonus too. The varieties cross-pollinate, so the volunteers drift into new colors and combinations over the years, and every spring brings a few flowers nobody has ever seen before, in your garden or anyone else's. Number 2. Foxglove. Foxglove is the one that won't bloom this year, and it's still the best deal on the list. It's a biennial, which means it splits its life across 2 seasons. Sow seed this June, and the plant spends this year building a low rosette of leaves. Next June, that rosette sends up a spire 4 to 5 feet tall, packed with purple, pink, or white bells, blooms for weeks in part shade across zones 4 through 9, then sheds more seed than you could use in a lifetime and dies. Sow it 2 Junes in a row and you have overlapping generations, which means the colony blooms every single year from then on. Compare that to the garden center, which sells foxglove already in bloom for somewhere around $10 a pot. The store sells this plant at its most expensive moment, which is also its last, because a blooming foxglove is finished that fall no matter what you do. A $2 packet buys the same flowers for the rest of your gardening life. Leave the spires standing until the pods turn brown, and respect the one serious rule. Every part of foxglove is poisonous, so sight it away from pets and grandkids and wash your hands after handling it. The deer already know, which is why they never touch it. Number 1. Larkspur. Larkspur takes the top spot because it delivers the thing gardeners pay the most to fail at: tall blue delphinium-style spikes, without the delphinium price or the delphinium heartbreak. The University of New Hampshire Extension lists larkspur among the most dependable self-sowing annuals, calling its return almost guaranteed in a rich, moist, well-drained spot with full sun. The spires run 2 to 4 feet in blue, purple, pink, and white. They bloom in early summer, and bees and butterflies work them all day long. Larkspur seed is the one on this list that genuinely wants cold. If you're in zones 3 through 5, sow it now while your nights are still cool. From zone 6 on south, hold the packet and scatter the seed in September instead, and it will sprout in fall or late winter and bloom next spring. Either way, you only do this once. After the first season, the plants drop seed in midsummer. That seed waits out the winter, and it beats you to the garden in spring. Don't disturb the soil where it stood, and when the ferny seedlings appear in early spring, leave them be. From a distance, they look a bit like weeds, so look closely before you pull anything, because that little green patch is your flower budget, already spent and already growing. Put the whole list together, and the math changes shape. 13 seed packets cost somewhere around $25 to $30 one time. A typical spring haul of bedding flats runs more than that every single year, and those plants are guaranteed dead by Thanksgiving. The self-sowers ask for 1 June of sowing, a few weeks of restraint with the pruners in August, and a little tolerance for scruffy seed heads in fall. In exchange, the gardener knocks itself every year, free of charge, for as long as you let it. Picture next May. Roll the racks out front, flats of petunias and marigolds lined up the way they always are, priced the way they always are. And you walk right past them, because your larkspur is already knee-high. The poppies are budding, and the violets have been blooming since March, and not one of them cost you a dime this year. The business model only works if your flowers stay dead. Yours won't. If this saved you a trip down the annuals aisle, there's plenty more budget gardening like this on the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.